Most people think influence is about what you say, but the most powerful part of your message, it's the silence between your words. That pause, right there, is where your power lies. Not because you're unsure, but because you're in control. And when you learn how to pause with purpose, people start to lean in. They start to listen. And suddenly, you're not just talking, you're leading. Most people don't realize how powerful silence can be. We're conditioned to think that in every conversation, we have to fill the space. Keep talking, keep explaining, keep convincing. But what if I told you that the most powerful part of your communication isn't in the words you say, but in the pauses between them? See, when you pause, something unexpected happens. People lean in. Their brains do a little double take. They tune in, not out. Why? Because we've all been wired to chase sound, to follow words. But when that flow stops, even just for a second, the human mind perks up. It starts asking, why did they stop? What are they going to say next? That's influence. And it's subtle, but incredibly real. Think about the last time you were in a conversation and someone paused right before saying something important. Didn't that moment feel heavier, more intentional? That's not by accident. That's a signal. A pause tells your listener, this matters. Pay attention. And here's the thing, it doesn't even have to be long, just a second or two, long enough to create space for your words to land. Long enough to let the message settle before the next one arrives. Now, let's break this down a bit. From a psychological standpoint, silence actually triggers the brain to process more deeply. When someone pauses before they speak, or even mid-sentence, your brain treats that moment like a highlighter. It slows down, takes a snapshot, and stores it with greater weight. You're not just hearing, you're absorbing. That's why speakers who master the pause are so compelling. They give you time to reflect. They let their words breathe, and when words breathe, people listen. But here's what's more interesting. It's not just about helping others hear you better. It's about how they see you. When you pause in conversation, especially when you're being asked something difficult, or you're trying to make a point, what you're really doing is signaling self-control. You're saying, I'm not rushed. I'm not rattled. I'm right here, grounded, and I'm choosing every word with purpose. And that commands respect. People notice that. They may not be able to put it into words, but they feel it. We've all been around someone who talks fast and never stops. And sure, that can feel energetic, even entertaining for a while. But over time, it starts to feel chaotic. You start to tune them out. There's no rhythm, no moment to catch your breath, no space for anything to land. Contrast that with someone who speaks with intention, who knows when to let silence do the talking. That person feels composed. That person feels like a leader. And maybe you're thinking, well, that sounds great, but silence makes me nervous. I get it. Silence feels awkward at first. It feels like you're not doing enough, or like the other person might think you're unsure or lost. But let me shift your thinking here. Silence is only awkward when it's unintentional. When you own the silence, when you use it as a tool, people don't see it as weakness. They see it as confidence. They see it as strength. There's a moment I want you to imagine. You're in a meeting. Someone challenges your idea. Instead of jumping in to defend yourself immediately, you pause. You breathe. You let the silence hang for just a second. Now think about what that silence just did. You didn't rush. You didn't flinch. You stood in that space with composure, and everyone in the room felt it. You didn't have to speak over anyone to gain control. You didn't have to raise your voice. All you had to do was pause. That's power. That's presence. And that's what so many people are missing. Not because they don't have something to say, but because they're so busy saying it, they never give it the weight it deserves. If everything is said at full speed, with no space, no rhythm, it all starts to blend together. But when you slow it down, when you give people a moment to breathe with you, to think with you, your words become memorable. They become magnetic. You don't need a louder voice to be heard. You need a quieter pause that holds weight. Because when you pause, it tells people that you're not afraid of silence, that you're not desperate for approval, that you're not just speaking. You're leading the conversation, guiding it, setting the pace. And whether you're speaking to one person or 100, that kind of presence is unforgettable. So the next time you're in a conversation, try it. Before you speak, pause. Before you respond, pause. Even when you finish a sentence, don't rush into the next. Let your message breathe, let it land, and watch what happens. People won't just hear you, they'll feel you. A lot of people think influence comes from having all the right answers or saying more to prove your point. But I want to flip that idea on its head, because real influence, it's not about talking more. It's about knowing when not to talk at all. When you learn to use silence strategically. When you pause before delivering a thought, or right after a powerful sentence. What you're doing is creating space. And in that space, something shifts. The room gets still. People start listening, not just with their ears, but with their whole attention. You're no longer just speaking. You're holding their focus. You're directing their attention. That is how you command respect without raising your voice. Think about it. When someone talks non-stop, constantly trying to explain, justify, or convince, what do? We start to tune out. We look at the clock. We scroll through our thoughts. The speaker loses control of the moment because they're trying to fill every second. But when someone speaks with clarity and pauses with purpose, they don't have to say much at all to be heard. Their presence fills the space before their words even finish landing. There's a kind of authority that comes from knowing you don't have to rush. When you speak with intention and allow room for a message to settle, people read that as confidence. It tells them you're not scrambling to prove your worth, you already know it. And that knowing, the way it shows up in the rhythm of your voice, the stillness in your pause, it speaks volumes. Let's get practical for a second. You're in a conversation, maybe you're trying to persuade someone or share your perspective. The instinct is to go on and on, to explain every angle so they don't misunderstand you. But here's the truth, saying more doesn't always bring clarity. Sometimes it causes confusion. It muddies your message. It weakens your position. But let's say instead you say one powerful sentence, and then you pause. You just let it sit. That pause, right there, makes people consider what you just said. It gives weight to your words. It says, this is enough. It says, I meant that. You don't need a long speech to make an impact. You need a sentence with space around it. That's what people remember. There's a discipline in holding back. It's not always easy. In fact, it can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to filling every silence, smoothing over every awkward moment, or jumping in to avoid tension. But that pause, it creates contrast. It separates the noise from the meaning. And in that contrast, people start to pay attention differently. It's the same principle in music. If there's no rest, no break, the notes all blur together. But when there's a pause, even a quick one, it adds rhythm, it gives emotion, it builds tension. And then, when the next note comes in, it hits harder, it lands with more feeling. Speech is the same way. Conversation is the same way. We think people will lose interest if we stop talking. But the opposite is true. People lock in when they feel the weight of your words. Now think about how this shows up in leadership. Great leaders don't dominate every conversation. They don't talk over others to prove they're in charge. They speak with control. They use silence like punctuation. And when they pause, everyone else pauses too. Not because they're afraid, but because they're drawn in. That's what presence looks like. It's not about volume. It's about precision. It's about being able to hold attention with less. This works in personal relationships too. Maybe you're in a disagreement. Someone's upset. You feel the urge to explain, defend, jump in. But if you can just pause, just take a beat, you shift the dynamic. You show that you're not reactive. You're intentional. That space gives the other person a moment to feel seen. And in return, they'll be more likely to hear you when you speak. Pausing doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to be deliberate. It's not silence from uncertainty. It's silence from strength. You're not racing to fill the air because you're comfortable letting your presence do the heavy lifting. And when you get to that place where you can say less but influence more, you start to notice a shift in how people respond to you. They listen longer. They engage deeper. They take you seriously. So when you step into a room or into a conversation, remember this: your words matter, but your timing shapes how they're received. Don't rush to speak just to be heard. Speak when it counts. And let the silence around your words do its job. That's where real influence lies. That's how you hold power, without ever needing to force it. Because in the end, you don't need more words to make your point. You just need the right pause. Let's talk about the moments that matter most, the tough conversations. The ones where tension is high, emotions are running strong, and you can feel the pressure to respond quickly. That's when the power of the pause really shows up. Because when things get heated, when we're challenged, our first instinct is to react. Defend ourselves, correct someone, prove our point. But here's what I want you to remember in that moment: the pause is your greatest tool. Why? Because that pause gives you control, not over the other person, but over yourself. It gives you just enough space to shift from reacting to responding. Those are two very different things. Reacting is emotional. It's fast. It's raw. But responding, that's measured. That's thoughtful. That's powerful. And the pause is what gets you from one to the other. Now, most people don't pause in moments of conflict because they're afraid of what silence might say. They think, if I don't respond immediately, I'll look weak. I'll lose ground. I'll seem unsure. But that's not true. Pausing before you speak, especially in high-stress conversations, actually projects strength. It shows you're not shaken. It tells the other person, I'm not afraid to take my time here. I value what I say, and I value how I say it. Let me give you something practical. You're in a disagreement, maybe with a colleague, a partner, or a client. They say something that triggers you. Your heart rate goes up. You want to jump in and set the record straight. But instead, you stop, you breathe. You give yourself that 2-second pause. And in that space, you choose clarity over chaos. You're not ignoring what was said. You're not backing down. You're simply owning the moment. That pause keeps you from saying something you'll regret. It helps you listen fully, not just to the words, but to the intent behind them. And when you finally speak, what comes out isn't a defensive reaction. It's a confident, clear response. That changes everything. The temperature in the conversation drops. The dynamic shifts. The power moves back to you. Not because you overpowered the other person, but because you stayed composed. We've all seen this in action. Think about the people who walk into a tense situation and somehow calm it down without raising their voice. They don't fight for control, they are the control. You can feel their presence. And often, they're not even saying much. They're observing, listening, letting others speak first. And then, when they do speak, they do it with weight, with focus. That's not a gift they were born with. That's a discipline. That's learning to use the pause as a position of strength. And it's not just about verbal conflict. It shows up in negotiations too. You're making a deal. You lay out your terms. Then you pause. You don't fill the silence. You don't start justifying or softening the offer. You let the weight of your words hang in the air. Let the other person sit with it. That's when influence happens. That's when the balance shifts. Because silence in negotiation isn't a lack of power, it is power. It shows you're not desperate for agreement. You're not chasing approval. You're grounded in your value, and believe me, the other person feels that. They may not say it out loud, but they're recalibrating. They're adjusting how seriously they take you based on how well you manage that space. This same principle applies in personal relationships. Arguments with people you love, conversations that cut deep. Those moments can spiral so quickly if we don't slow them down. If you've ever said something in anger and wished you could take it back, you know exactly what I mean. But what if, in that split second of frustration, you paused? You allowed just enough silence for your better judgment to catch up. You might say something very different. Something more honest, more helpful, more in line with the person you want to be. And that's what the pause really gives us. It's not just a communication tactic. It's a reflection of character. It says, I'm not here to win a battle. I'm here to preserve trust. I'm here to build understanding. And when that becomes your default mode, not reacting, but pausing first, people begin to trust your voice. Not just your words, but your presence. They'll come to you not just because you speak well, but because you handle pressure well. Because in a room full of noise, you offer clarity. In the middle of conflict, you bring calm. And you do it not by overpowering others, but by mastering yourself. So the next time you find yourself in a tough conversation, don't rush to respond. Don't try to out-talk the tension. Just stop. Breathe. Pause. Let the space do the heavy lifting, and watch how the tone changes. Watch how the respect rises. Because real control doesn't come from speaking first. It comes from knowing when to wait. A lot of people hear about the power of pauses and think, okay, that sounds great, but how do I actually do that? And I get it. It's one thing to understand the concept of strategic silence. It's another to put it into practice in your everyday life, where conversations move fast, distractions come easy, and the pressure to respond is always right there. But here's the truth. Pausing is a skill, and like any skill, it can be developed, practiced, and refined. It doesn't happen overnight, but the more intentional you become with your speech, the more natural it starts to feel. We're not just talking about pausing for dramatic effect on a stage or in a meeting room. I'm talking about building this pause into your daily rhythm, your conversations with family, your texts, your emails, your voice. Every single day, you get the chance to train yourself to be more deliberate, more present, and more composed. And it starts small. One of the best places to begin is by noticing your filler words. You know, the ones, like, We use them because silence feels uncomfortable. We want to hold the space while we think, so we fill it with noise. But what if instead you just paused? What if you allowed yourself to take a breath, gather your thoughts, and then speak with intention? That single shift, replacing a filler word with silence, elevates how people hear you. You sound clearer, more credible, and here's the kicker: you feel more grounded, too. That's the first part, catching the little habits. The next part is choosing when to use the pause. This isn't about becoming robotic or overly scripted. It's about learning to feel the rhythm of your conversations. When you're telling a story, you don't just rush through the details. You build it. You create tension. You guide your listener, and then, just before the punchline or the key point, you stop for a second. That silence makes people lean in. You've drawn them in with the rhythm of your words. And they're right there with you. It works in job interviews. You get asked a tough question. Instead of launching into a quick answer just to avoid the silence, you pause. You show them that you're not rattled, that you're thinking. It's subtle, but that pause speaks louder than any rushed answer ever could. It tells the other person that you're calm under pressure, and that's the kind of presence people remember. It works in parenting, too. You're about to respond to your child out of frustration. You stop, you pause. That 1 second gives you just enough space to shift the tone. You move from reaction to intention. And just like that, the conversation changes. It's not magic, it's practice. One thing that helps is breathing, not just the automatic kind, but deep, intentional breathing. If you want to pause better, start by noticing your breath. Before you speak, take a breath. When you're feeling rushed, take a breath. When the pressure is rising, take a breath. That breath becomes the gateway to your pause. It centers you. It slows you down. It brings you back to the moment. And as you practice these moments, you begin to notice something else. People start responding to you differently. They're more patient, more attentive. They listen more closely when you speak. Why? Because you're not just reacting anymore. You're guiding the conversation. You're showing up with presence, with purpose. And that makes an impact. Now let's be honest. There will be times when this feels unnatural. You'll feel like the pause is too long, like people are staring at you, like you're being judged for not saying something quick enough. But let me tell you something. That's not real. That's just the discomfort of growth. Because what's actually happening is you're giving people the gift of your full attention. And giving your words the space to land. That's not weakness. That's mastery. So don't wait for the perfect moment to start using this. Start in the small moments. Next time someone asks how your day is going, pause before answering. Next time you're telling a story, pause before the key moment. Next time someone says something that triggers you, pause before you speak. It's these little moments, repeated over time, that rewire your default setting from reacting to responding, from rushing to leading. And as you get more comfortable with the pause, something powerful begins to happen. Your communication slows down, but your impact speeds up. People begin to hear your words more clearly. They respect your calm. They remember your message. Not because you said more, but because you said it with space, with intention, and with clarity. So don't underestimate the power of those small pauses. They may seem simple, even invisible, but they hold the key to how you show up in the world. Not louder, not faster, just more powerfully. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all.